Go to the ranking member, and Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Tester, for yielding. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. I just have to say I am really disappointed in this administration's treatment of our immigrants and religious minorities and many others. I can't say I'm shocked. I listened to President Trump's rhetoric during the campaign, but I am disappointed, and I'm going to keep standing with these families across our country to fight back, whether we're talking about dreamers who've come out of the shadows to participate in the DACA program, or whether we're talking about TPS recipients who've been part of our communities for decades. There are families who are being torn apart at our borders today, and we're banning people from visiting our country merely because of their religion. So I just want to state I disagree with this administration on every step of the way. But I today wanted to focus my questions to you on one of the more damaging decisions. In December, acting in secret, ICE changed how it would treat pregnant women in their custody. And the new policy means that a lot more pregnant women will be stuck in detention for a longer period of time, often with inadequate support, whether it's nutrition or medical care or prenatal care. And in response to that, the American Academy of Pediatricians, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and the American Academy of Family Physicians wrote to you saying that detention, quote, puts the health of women and adolescents and their pregnancies at great risk. And they go on to explain something that should be obvious. Detention facilities do not offer the level of care that pregnant women need. Now, on top of the real consequences to these pregnant women, for months the departments didn't even tell Congress about this inhumane and dramatic policy change. And when this new policy change was finally posted on your website, the question and answer page included a question stating, and I quote, "Isn't detaining pregnant women a human rights abuse?" Well, your question and answer page raised the question, and I think the answer is pretty clear. When your department is doing something that is wrong and misguided and, in my opinion, cruel and an embarrassment to our country, I think it's wrong, and I really urge you to reverse course on this. I know it's wrong. I think you should, but I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. Can you truthfully tell us that detention facilities offer the same level of care to pregnant women as a hospital or other medical facility that's designed to care for pregnant women?
What I can tell you is we screen every female for pregnancy from ages 18 to 56 when we encounter them. We provide them prenatal care. We provide them separate housing. We provide them specialists. We will take them to appointments if they need to go somewhere else. We provide them counseling, and we provide them religious.
Okay, but they are in detention facilities. Do you know how many pregnant women are detained today?
I don't know how many, no, ma'am. But I will say the reason they're detained is because they illegally crossed our border. Okay, if they went to a port of entry, that would not be a crime. So I would like to encourage those who are pregnant. Let me just tell you, I'm short on time. I have another question, but I will tell you, you're just trying to discourage pregnant women. They don't come here because they're pregnant. No, I'm trying to encourage them from breaking the law. If they go to a port of entry, they have not broken the law. They can make their asylum claim.
But to put them in a detention center that is inhumane.
They broke the law. Yes, ma'am. We do not exempt classes. We enforce the law.
Inhumanely and cruelly.
Well, I will tell you, actually, they are given not only adequate care in facilities.
You and I will disagree on that point.
But it is much better care than when they're living in the shadows and they're not provided any care after entering our country illegally.
We obviously disagree. And let me just ask you another question, because this committee gets a lot of requests for additional funds to reprogram our funds or transfer funds due to overspending and a lack of fiscal discipline in your department. As you know, Congress, not this administration, sets your budget, and you have to live within the means that we give to you. And to me, far too frequently, it seems a big part of DHS overspending is caused by ICE unnecessarily detaining people, like we talked about, pregnant women. As you know, detention is really expensive. Each year ICE detains someone. It costs taxpayers over $50,000. For comparison, by the way, that's 4 times the amount the federal government spends on each child in our public schools. So what this means is that taxpayers are now footing the bill for food, medical care, clothing, and the expensive prison contracts that ICE is using for detention, like the facility that's in my home state. To me, that's really inexpensible because there are less expensive and more effective alternatives to detention. And in fact, according to your own budget, to use one of the alternatives to detention costs less than $1,500 per year compared to that $50,000. So while you're asking for billions of dollars in additional funds to build the unnecessary border wall, hire more ICE and Border Patrol, expand detention, militarize the border, you're asking to cut funding for alternatives to detention in your budget. So why is the department not asking us to expand the use of alternatives to detention in order to save taxpayer money?
We are looking to do both. So as you know, one of the alternatives to detention is an ankle bracelet. We do utilize those in situations where appropriate. If somebody, however, has broken the law in the sense that there are multiple reentry or they have some other reason to be criminally prosecuted, we actually turn them over to the marshals. We defer them over for prosecution, in which case there is no option for an alternate to detention. So if you look at all the numbers, we are trying to find ways to do it. But I do want to just say again, if you cross in between the ports of entry,
I know what your philosophy is. I'm out of time.
It's not a philosophy. It's a law Congress passed.
Well,
so we should encourage people to go to the ports if they need to come to seek asylum.
Expand the use of ATD. It seems to me it's cost-payer saving and much more humane.
Thank you. Senator Langford.
Thank you. Secretary Nielsen, would you pass on a thank you from this committee to the law enforcement folks that you work with? They have an incredibly difficult job, and they literally put their lives on the line every single day to be able to protect the United States and our neighbors. And we very much appreciate the work that you're doing and the work that they're doing all the time. I'd also like to thank you for the very hard work y'all have done on election security. Y'all have done a lot in the past year working on election security issues and trying to get to a better place than what we were in 2016. Both clearances and getting security clearances for state leaders, working in coordination, helping people to think through the what-ifs, and trying to be able to have that ongoing dialogue that's much needed. So I appreciate that very much. And if you can pass that on to your team as well, because they've done a lot of work on that. Let me ask some specific appropriation questions. One of them is about the dollars that were given for 2018 for wall construction, the wall system. Can you give us a progress report of what's happening? And I have a ton of questions to be able to go through. So if you can give me just a brief update on what's happening on that wall construction, the wall system for 2018.
Sure. So what we're doing right now, as you know, is building a 30-foot new bollard-style wall in Calexico. We are then moving to Santa Teresa. After that, we will move to RGV. So we have, as you know, about 654 existing miles now, and we're, 980 we're looking at, but over the next 3 years, we'd get to that 200. So we're moving forward as expeditiously as we can. As you know, it's a complicated process with the land acquisition and working with state and locals. We work very closely with the governors, the ranchers, and others who are along the border, own the property, to understand where and when we need the wall.
Okay, but that's moving expeditiously at this point?
Yes, sir.
Great. So $276 million has been requested for Calexico to finish up that port of entry as well. Help me understand what those dollars would go towards. That's a chunk of money to be able to finish out that port of entry there. And I believe that's the second year of that funding for that. What would happen with Calexico if that money is allocated?
If the money is allocated, we'd build out the rest of the wall system. So it's not just that infrastructure and impedance, but it's also the surveillance. It's also looking at how to connect it to the nearest port of entry. It's some of the technology. It's the integrated towers. And it's the training of personnel and additional personnel who would then be needed to work at that location.
So Calexico itself is a border crossing port of entry. Give me a ballpark, not just for that facility, but for all of our southern border, the number of legal crossings that happen a day or a year, whichever one you want to do there.
It's 360 million a year that DHS encounters, and that's northern and southern border, but of course it's mostly southern. Mostly southern.
So easily estimate 500,000, one way, 500,000 people cross from Mexico into the United States every day.
Yes, San Ysidro, which has been in the news a lot lately, as you know, we process 100,000 people a day in San Ysidro.
It is always interesting to me the number of times I get into a conversation with people and they talk about the only way to get into the country is illegally crossing into the country, that's the only route, when we have 500,000 people a day legally crossing into the United States.
Yes, sir.
Working through the process the right way. So it's not as if the only way to be able to cross our southern border is to illegally cross that border.
Correct, and it's much, much safer to go through the ports of entry for the immigrant.
Let me ask you your vision for the St. Elizabeth facility. Who do you think would move there? As what part of your office? I know there's been some debate on where that will go and who will go there for that St. Elizabeth facility.
St. Elizabeth has been a bit of a difficult construction project. We were very much restricted in how we can build. As you know, we had to build within a building, if you will, to observe the historic requirements that D.C. laid out. And so what that means is we're constantly rejiggering who can go there at what time, because we're trying to get people there as quickly as possible. So the Coast Guard is there. The headquarters elements, unfortunately, are now not slated to go there until about March 2019. But we continue to work with GSA to move forward as quickly as we can.
Okay. Do you anticipate FEMA moves there?
FEMA is still slated to move there, yes, sir. Now,
Okay.
that could change, and we would definitely let you know if that's the case.
Let me run through a couple of quick things as well. I visited with folks from the Coast Guard and Customs and Border Patrol about the steps that they have to go through in the process of interdicting drugs on the water. They have the same steps, but a very different process. Customs and Border Patrol can move very rapidly through those steps. Coast Guard may take 30 to 40 minutes to be able to move through the exact same steps. If you wouldn't mind, take a look at that and try to figure out why Customs and Border Patrol can move much faster than Coast Guard can. It makes it very, very difficult for them and is also a large cost savings if we can actually make those two consistent on it. I know that there is, from the omnibus bill, there was a decision that was requested of you on H-2B visas. You were given additional authority to be able to increase those numbers. We're still waiting for that process to work through that. And one last quick question from you. Are there asylum laws in Costa Rica and Belize and Ecuador and Brazil and other countries? Because there's a lot of talk about people from Central America coming to the United States. It's my understanding Costa Rica is a very peaceful country as well. Belize is a very peaceful country. What's the belief of why they would come here rather than there for asylum?
What I can say is we encourage anybody who is in fear for their life to go to the first safe country that they enter. That is the international approach, the G7 approach, the Five Eyes approach, the UNHCR approach. So we continue to encourage those to do it under our laws. The only way that we can stop people is if we have safe third agreements with other countries. We are working towards those. We'll have one with Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Murkowski.